We're about to get started. Good afternoon and welcome to our afternoon hearing of day 4 of week 2 of our budget hearings. We're glad to be joined by the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission. Before we begin, Chairman Struzzi, in introductory comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Harris. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. While we understand the PUC isn't directly funded through the general fund, the work that you do clearly affects all of our constituents. Energy prices, energy policy, and affordability are important to all of us at a time when we see our electricity costs increasing exponentially and the need for baseload production increasing as well. So, all right, thank you. We'll get to it.
Thank the gentleman. Commissioners, would you please stand so I can swear everybody in before we get started? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, so help you God? I do. Good. You may be seated. In the middle of the table is our time clock. It will turn green when our members are ready to start with their questions. They will have 5 minutes to ask questions. At yellow, that means that there's 30 seconds left. And we ask that you begin to wrap up your comments. And at red, that means their time has expired, and therefore we ask you to conclude your comments. Chairman DeFrank, you can proceed with your opening statement.
It's on.
Oh. Thank you, Chairman Struzzi, members of the House Appropriations Committee. It's a pleasure to be here today. Discuss our budget. My name is Steve DeFrank. I'm the chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. At its core, our mission is straightforward. We work to ensure essential utility services are provided to Pennsylvanians on a safe, reliable, and affordable basis. And when we say essential, we mean the services that power our daily life, from electricity, natural gas, water, wastewater, and telecommunications. The systems that supports our homes and businesses, manufacturers, and hospitals across the Commonwealth. The Commission regulates over 8,400 entities across those sectors, but we also have some other important public safety responsibilities that you may not be aware of, and that would include pipeline safety, oversight related to rail crossings, and transportation for hire services, and that would include transportation of goods or people. So moving companies, delivery companies, as well as our taxis and Ubers and Lyfts. For fiscal year 2026-27, the Commission is requesting $104.78 million. That includes $5.38 million in federal funds that support our pipeline safety, rail safety, and motor carrier safety activities. The state share of this is $98.102 million. And that's an important point. As Chair Struzzi pointed out, we are not funded from the state's general fund. We are funded through assessments on regulated entities. This request represents a 2.18% increase in our budget, primarily driven by contractual salary and benefit obligations, as well as managing our current program load. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions members may have.
Thank the gentleman. We'll start with Representative Curry.
Thank you, Chairman. And hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I want to start off with an affordability question. In 2025, electric, gas, and water utilities terminated service to a record 415,000 households. In fact, we have hit record terminations each year since 2023. How does the Commission intend to reverse this troubling trend?
So this is a troubling trend. When we talk about our assistance programs, this year was the highest year ever for first-time assistance, and that's into our LIHEAP programs as well as our customer assistance programs. So as I always talk about, we're seeing this issue climb higher and higher up a socioeconomic ladder. Families that may not have had, in addition to the folks that have always struggled paying utility bills, families that may not have had an issue 10 years ago are finding themselves having an issue today. So one of the things we've done is trying to match those available dollars, make sure dollars are available through our customer assistance programs, and then match them with customers that are available, that they're available to, that qualify for them. One of the first things that Representative Zerfer, you got a promotion. You got a promotion. Commissioner Zerfus and I did whenever we first came to the commission was we did a C motion on trying to find ways of increasing our participation in our customer assistance programs. And one of that is with data sharing. In addition to the LIHEAP data sharing we started last year with DHS, we're starting to data share amongst our utilities. We weren't able to come up with a uniform application. That was what our goal was. We weren't able to do that, but what we were able to do was come up with like data points. So every application for customer assistance in Pennsylvania today has 12 to 15 points that are on everyone's application. Those key data points then we can share with other utilities. Because the reality is, if you're eligible for a customer assistance program in your electric company, you're likely eligible for one with your natural gas provider or your water provider.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that information. I just have to get one more question in. So there are about 1.1 million small businesses in the Commonwealth, and they continue to struggle with affordability and rising energy costs. What analysis has the PUC conducted to understand the cumulative impact of recent utility rate cases on small businesses across Pennsylvania? And also another question is, how does the Commission evaluate whether proposed rate increases will place an undue burden on small commercial customers compared to residential or large industrial users?
Sure. So I'll answer the first part on the 1.1 million small businesses. As you know, so the way rate case works is two phases to it. How big the revenue requirement is for the utility, that's the number that's required, and then how we cut that up amongst our various rate classes. As you know, we do have a statutory advocate for small businesses in Pennsylvania. We're one of the only states in the country that has an advocate for small businesses, and that's our small business advocate, Nazra Sabri, who's doing a great job, by the way.
Doing an excellent job.
Yes. So we have her advocacy there, and she enters rate cases on behalf of our small businesses. So the revenue requirement comes out. Where her role then comes in a rate case is making sure small businesses aren't getting a big piece of that pie, that they're getting their fair share. So that's her statutory role. That's what she does. And then whenever if it's a settlement, if it ends up in a settlement, she would then sign that settlement. If it's fully litigated, she would go through the litigation and take it out to fruition. So that's the small businesses representation in these rate cases. Additionally, and if I may, I don't want to take up all your time, but
No, I'm good from here. You can answer.
okay. So we do have, the House Energy Committee held a hearing on Monday on net metering, and some of the issues there, that's falling all to the small business class. So the advocate is aware of that. She's been engaging with that. We've had several meetings, conversations about that to make sure all those cost points aren't put on our small businesses.
I really appreciate that, and I look forward to working with the small business advocate and you all to continue to help our, our constituents get what they need. Thank you so much.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Kale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here today. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, we've been having these hearings, and energy policy and Pennsylvania energy in general has come up a number of times. And I want to ask you a couple of questions. And we've heard good news about what's going on in Pennsylvania, and we've heard bad news. The good news, of course, is that Pennsylvania has abundance of energy, our natural gas, our coal resources, our nuclear plants, our well-run facilities. We have the answers to a lot of today's problems. And another good thing I think that has come out of these discussions is there is a growing consensus that in order to meet the affordability demands that we are talking about, in order to meet the reliability demands that we are talking about, there is a common, consistent issue that needs to be addressed. And that issue is generation of base load energy. And it's convenient for us Pennsylvanians to have that as the issue because we have so much of the raw natural resources of base load energy. We have coal, we have natural gas. So we can create essentially a win-win. We could help our workers, we can generate better electricity, we can have reliability. But then there's the bad news. And the bad news is, and I believe you have already conceded this as well in the hearings in the Senate, is that we are facing a crisis. A potential crisis. We're talking about brownouts, blackouts. You already heard it earlier today. We talked about affordability issues, the skyrocketing cost of electricity in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The energy capital of the United States, I would argue. We are facing these issues. So I want to ask you a series of questions about how we can solve these issues. I want to ask you about some of the plans that are floating out there today. The first question is, would a carbon tax on electricity producers incentivize, facilitate more baseload energy production or less?
So I think you're talking about the Governor's PACER program.
I'm just talking about carbon tax generally, sir,
So,
and if we could keep answers short, I'd appreciate it.
we really don't deal with that. We are an economic regulator. We're not an environmental regulator, so all that would fall upon DEP.
So putting a tax on electrical consumer or electrical producers using coal and gas, you're saying you can't answer whether or not that's going to...
So I think what you're referring to is, if the program you're referring to is what I thought it was, when we talked about RGGI, the Senate did ask us to do a cost analysis on RGGI. We do not have the capabilities of doing that. We reached out to the IFO and asked if we can serve as a technical advisor to them and see if they could do a price model on it. They came back and they were not able to do a price model without investment, a major investment in software. So I don't know what the cost is. What Senator Yall then did was he sent it to PJM, and PJM did do a cost impact on it on the out years. We can probably get that for you. Now, that was on RGGI, though, which is similar to a cap-and-trade program.
Which is similar to PACER. And just so we're clear, since 2019, when we were flirting with RGGI, thankfully we're out of it now, we're not flirting with it anymore, but when we were, there were exactly zero new announcements of base load energy facilities coming to Pennsylvania to the grid. Zero. A second question, would expanding the alternative energy portfolio incentivize or facilitate more baseload energy production in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania or less? In particular, Tier 1 of solar panels and windmills going from 8% to 35%.
So on your first question, we would like to get back to you on that. I do believe there was baseload gas built in York County while the state was considering RGGI. So
it wasn't announced while we were in RGGI. The project started before RGGI was announced. It was not announced after going into it or flirting with it.
And I knew it was around that same time. Yeah. Regarding AEPS, will it result in increased baseload generation? I would say yes, because it's our AEPS, we go beyond a renewable standard. We have carbon in our AEPS plan.
I asked about Tier 1 in particular. The mandate from going from 8% to 35% for wind and solar. Is that baseload energy?
I do not believe it is.
No, that's not baseload energy. This lightning plan is going to be a lightning bolt to our grid. And we're playing politics with people's light switches. And ultimately what happens when there's brownout and blackouts isn't just prices go up. People die because of brownouts and blackouts. And that's what we're heading towards. And we have issues with PJM because of the same policies in New Jersey and Maryland. And now our answer is to do the same exact thing. It's unacceptable that this is the energy policy of this administration. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Kincaid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the most significant way that the PUC can improve accessibility and transparency of its processes for consumers that are not represented by attorneys?
Not used to that. I keep trying to turn on my microphone, and the always on, it just doesn't, it's not sinking in yet, so I apologize for that.
No worries.
So your question, that the way we can increase
Accessibility and transparency for the PUC processes for those who
so are we
aren't
talking consumer
sophisticated,
complaint
aren't represented by
consumer
attorneys.
complaint cases?
Yeah.
Yes. So we do have we do allow pro se complaints. So a consumer complaint case, they do not have to have a lawyer. They are allowed to represent themselves. One of the things that Commissioner Zerfas did was ease the intake process of those, working on our intake form, doing a fillable form, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Commissioner.
Yeah, I mean, you teed up very nicely, Mr. Chairman. The whole point was to make the process easier for pro se complainants, right? So whether you're going to be filing a formal complaint or trying to understand the process should be easy to understand, intuitive, and accessible, right? So like we undertook internally kind of like an operational efficiency kind of look at how we do those things with the consumer in mind. We also provide additional materials in other languages. That was part of that, modernization, I'll call it, of our materials. And so that's part of that process. Okay. In addition to that, though, we do have a pending rulemaking which seeks to modernize our internal administrative procedures and processes. We call it internally the 135 chapters. It's excuse me. It explores some of these issues that you brought up, whether it's attorney representation for individuals, for small businesses, and how some of these other processes work for those who may not be as in tune to the sophistication of a legal or some quasi-judicial process. So that is a pending issue. We did put it out for comment. We're going through those comments and seeing how we can modernize some of those internal rules.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentlelady. Representative Brown.
Chairman, I'm glad that you're all here because one of the primary questions I'm receiving from my constituents right now is about their increasing electric costs. My own mother has an astronomical bill that she can't afford, and I'm trying to help her navigate that. So I don't feel like I have good answers for them. I'm interested as to what your answer is as to why the rates are so astronomical.
So if we're talking about electricity, I think a lot of that is driven through wholesale market increases. Now, our wholesale market, we are a restructured state, which means PJM, utilities do not own generation in Pennsylvania. We go to the PJM marketplace to secure power. So, you can get, as a customer, you can either have a retail supplier or you can get supply through your default service, through your utility. That's all purchased to PJM. So those increases have resulted in capacity auction increases from large loads, the increased load forecast coming on. Our load forecast was pretty stagnant, 1% to 2% per year. We're seeing a large load increase, mostly driven by data centers. So that's driving the increase on the capacity side. But the other side is we're just seeing an increase in the cost of energy, cost of power. One of the things, and I was talking to Chairman Struzzi earlier, Chairman Struzzi 10 years ago talked about all of us putting all of our eggs in one basket. We're over 50% generation in PJM with natural gas. So when we see gas prices spike, electric prices follow because we're tying the commodities together too closely.
I know, but your agency is tasked with regulating that, correct?
We are not. We don't regulate generation. We are a restructured market. So the regulator of that would be FERC. That's federally regulated.
So you can do nothing to control pricing?
Through advocacy, we can control pricing, FERC filings. We've been active on those, and through an organization called OPSI, but all of our input is through simply advocacy. We do not regulate them.
Well, then we need more advocacy, because I can tell you that the seniors in my market that can't afford their heat won't understand that explanation. It's very frustrating. I also have concerns, just like many residential and commercial ratepayers across the Commonwealth, about the reliability and security of the electrical grid and ensuring the affordability. And you just brought up data centers. You know, the energy being produced to protect us, we are at risk of losing consistent energy service. How will your model tariff and current policies ensure such issues are addressed? And then what is the strategy to include guaranteed baseload generation in Pennsylvania, such as coal, natural gas, and nuclear power?
So again, we do not regulate generation in Pennsylvania, so we cannot mandate that. The advocacy that we talked about is the backstop auction that the governors and the White House worked on. We are working on the details of that, how PJM holds that backstop auction. The backstop auction is designed to provide power procurement by PJM if they don't meet their load requirement. The last capacity auction PJM held, they were 6 gigawatts shy of their reserve margin. It was the largest deficit in an auction we've seen. So the governors, along with the White House, came forward with a plan with 4 basic tenets to it, trying to ensure reliability for our grid, for our existing ratepayers now on the grid, as well as being able to incorporate data centers.
Well, I do remember Governor Shapiro having PJM at the budget address, saying that he was going to hold them accountable. So I'll look forward to that happening this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Gentlelady. Representative Mullins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the commissioners. It's great to see all of you and your teams here today. I've got 3 issues I hope to hit here, all of them surrounding how our utility costs are impacted, but in different ways. The first matter is the proposed acquisition by Aqua by American Water represents a significant potential consolidation within the water utility landscape here in Pennsylvania. Can you just outline in brief the process and timeline for public participation and stakeholder input on that process?
Sure. So that application was filed late last year, I believe last week in November. We are in the process of setting public input hearings. That is an acquisition, so there is no statutory timeline. I believe the request in the filing was to have the filing acted upon by the 4th quarter of 2026.
Okay, thank you. And just wondering, does the Commission have the ability to evaluate current regulatory frameworks, including fair market value provisions, and that would continue to provide balanced and equitable outcomes across the state in relation to these type of consolidations?
Sure. In that process, we will be looking at the financials of it and looking at the details of the deal.
Very good. Very good. Moving on, what broadly is the most significant way that the PUC could help to reduce the burden of utility costs for Pennsylvanians? So
again, I think that a lot of these costs are coming on the wholesale end, and how we deal with that. We've been active in OPSI and at FERC. We will continue to be active there in trying to make sure we develop a market construct that actually works. This capacity market, if we've seen anything, it's showing that it cannot respond to the current challenges. The load increase is too large, it's too rapid, and there's no end in sight. So this capacity construct was never designed to deal with these kind of challenges. PJM is going to have to come up with a new market construct. If they don't, we would be simply purchasing power on the spot market and the day-ahead market. Not that that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just, it's a thing. So that's what will happen. I think that PJM has to work on that, though, and to try to bring enough supply in, because that's what's happening. Supply's not coming in, demand's increasing, supply is staying stagnant or decreasing, and it's a simple supply-demand paradigm. That's what's increasing costs.
Which leads very well into my...
Representative?
Just good question. And one thing I wanted to add about that advocacy, it is important. It is not futile. When the commission gets involved through OPSI and our association, and when we get involved in the stakeholder process at PJM, we do get results. And one example is PJM just looked at, they do something called a quadrennial review, where they look at the market, all the inputs, what's going into it, and they looked at the demand curve where price is set for capacity for the next 4 years going forward. Me and my staff, we offered a potential solution into that stakeholder process. It was adopted by PJM. It's going to save $10 billion a year. So advocacy is very important.
That's a great point. Terrific point. Finally, we recently passed the Load Forecasting Accountability Act in conjunction with the budget. This is something we should all be very proud of, having worked on. As we know, data center speculation is driving so much of our energy price increases, and that is impacting the price auctions. What would it take to truly and finally reduce or exclude speculative impacts? Do you need every state to pass what we did, or can PJM act unilaterally to do?
So when I see the lights on, I'm going to answer that real quick, because first off, you all should be very proud. Chairman Burgos should be very proud because of the bill. Other states have taken lead. You were the first to do that. Pretty much every other restructured state in PJM is doing the same thing. We are entering an agreement with other states because we were the first ones out the gate. We need their data from their utilities, so we will be entering formal agreements to the other states to compile all that data and to do a check on PJM's load forecast. You notice PJM already revised their load forecast, reduced it by 5 gigawatts. That was a result of legislation passed here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Marcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. As Representative Brown mentioned, this issue in terms of affordability and bills is just so important right now. We're hearing it from, not only our constituents, but family members. It's really affecting people to the point where they're making decisions and changing their budgets because of how much costs have increased, doubled, tripled, et cetera. So you talked a little bit about the supply and demand aspect of this, which I appreciate. And so thank you for sharing those thoughts today. The thing that I've been hearing from my constituents is that they're concerned about their costs, but they're also concerned about the fact that because as part of PJM, we're all together in this, meaning that there are other states and their energy policies that are now impacting Pennsylvania consumers, and actually we are, in a sense, subsidizing other states in PJM because of the energy production that we have in our state. And so basically those states are relying on us to help keep the lights on in our state and the rest of the area in PJM. So I wanted to talk, I recently attended 2 House Republican Policy Committee hearings. One was in Pennsylvania, one was in Maryland. We were talking about how energy policies are important because we need to look at what we have now, what we have going forward when we're thinking about how costs are going to affect consumers. One of the PJM testifiers, Jason Stanek, in Maryland, I just want to read a couple quotes. PJM has been warning for several years now about the prospect that parts of our region could run short on power during high periods of demand. That possibility has been growing, partly due to state and federal policy decisions that are pushing generators to retire prematurely. For the price of utility bills to go down in a meaningful way, the current supply and demand fundamentals will need to return to a more balanced position. Either supply will need to increase or demand will need to decrease, just as you stated. We would implore all of our states in the PJ region not to retire any more resources until you have a sufficient amount of resources to back those retirements. Finally, please consider that any changes to the supply-demand imbalance that would further aggravate this imbalance will result in an increase to customers on their utility bills. With that in mind, I am wondering, I appreciate your advocacy, but we have other states to worry about right now. So are surrounding states with carbon policies like those in Virginia, New Jersey, and Maryland stressing and draining our grid? And is it fair to say that Pennsylvania is holding up the PJM grid right now as the largest exporter of electricity of any state in this nation? Yes, I just want you seem to be agreeing.
Oh, yes, we export 12 to 14 gigawatts a day.
I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that you were nodding.
Oh, no, by far, 12 to 14 gigawatts a day.
So then is it safe to say that if Pennsylvania starts adopting those similar types of policies, and we're the largest exporter, so those policies, meaning carbon taxes, overregulation, et cetera, what would that mean for our grid and potential costs for Pennsylvanians if we're already struggling right now? That would be bad, correct?
Sure. I mean, as we talk about it, we need baseload generation. You know, I know Representative Kell was talking about that. We need baseload generation. You need dispatchable generation to operate a grid.
Exactly. Thank you so much for saying that. And then finally, I have had a little bit of frustration when I have seen in the last month or two that people are simply pointing a finger at PJM as opposed to saying exactly what you are about the importance of generation and how the policies that all of the PJM states are looking at or have already adopted are really a huge contributor. So is PJM simply a boogeyman right now by some that are pointing the finger, or is there really something there?
Well, again, I don't think they're the boogeyman. I think that their market is broken because it is not meeting the challenges of today. They had no way of knowing this data center proliferation was going to come on. No one did. I mean, in fairness to PJM, 10 years ago, they had no way of knowing load forecasts were going to skyrocket like they are today. So they weren't prepared for this. I'm not going to sit here and be a Monday morning quarterback and blame them. Let's fix it. We have to fix this. Instead of blaming them and saying they didn't prepare, let's fix it because no one saw this coming. PJM or anyone, and by the way, when we're talking about Jason, I'm very good friends with Jason, but he's the former chair of Maryland. Did you know that? He was the former chair of the Maryland Commission, so a lot of the issues that he was talking about, he was actually the chair of the commission at the time.
I appreciate you sharing that. I'll just end to say that I hope that since he's from Maryland and that we've heard also about some things in New Jersey, that we take those lessons to heart and we don't end up adopting those things in Pennsylvania.
You're right. I will say that Maryland, they are trying to build some gas generation. I think that they are starting to see they need dispatchable baseload generation.
Thank you very much.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, commissioners, for being here today. I've gone through a few rate-making cases up in Lackawanna County in the last couple of years, and I feel like over the last couple of months, we've had one a month with water, gas, electric. But through that rate-making process, the PUC ensures the lowest responsible rate for consumers while maintaining financial stability for utilities. Under the law, the utility is entitled to recovery of its reasonably incurred expenses and a fair return on its investment. The Commission evaluates each utility's request for a rate increase based on those criteria. During a joint hearing in January before the House Energy and House Consumer Protection Technology and Utilities Committee, Chairman DeFrank suggested that the General Assembly should update the current statutory rate case timeframe in order to better protect consumers. Could you just expand on that?
Sure. So our current timeline is 9 months, which means we have 30. So it's actually 30 days to adjudicate it, but we can investigate it for 9 months. As we're seeing more and more rate cases, you know, Representative, I know we talked about it before. You know, we were seeing 6, 8 rate cases a year. That was doable. You know, in 24 we had 31 rate cases filed, and it's just it's daunting at 7 months. It's simply, you know, what we heard many members from both sides of the aisle, you know, the word scrutiny come, the word making sure these are prudent costs being incurred. and it just makes it increasingly difficult with such a short timeline. So any increase in the timeline, we would certainly.
Is there a way we could make that more accessible to the average ratepayer? So I became a party to one of our rate cases on behalf of my constituents, and the amount of information and legal briefs over the investigation timeframe became pretty daunting. Is there a way that we could make it easier for ratepayers to be parties to these but without being overwhelmed, right?
So we try to make it easy as possible through our public input hearings. If they wanted to actually be a party to the case, we have to remember that this is a legal proceeding. We have to make sure that all sides, are getting a fair shake here. So we'll talk about it. I'm not sure with actually, entering appearance how they would do that to be a party to the case. And so that's why we do public input hearings.
Yes.
To make sure their voice is heard. We did a lot of that up in Scranton there with the last PA American case, and it resulted in a quality of service study.
Thank you for that. And then finally, during his budget address, the governor outlined the need for a responsible infrastructure development standards for data centers. Could you provide input as it relates to what should be included in such standards?
So I think the biggest thing that the governor talked about, and it's something that when I testified in the Senate, if you asked me this a year ago, I probably wouldn't have been there. I had since changed my opinion, and that is bring your own generation. I think these data centers are an opportunity. I think they're an economic opportunity for us, but we have to do it responsibly. We've seen now in 3 auctions, this PJM auction, this market has not responded. We need more generation. So if we're bringing these large users on, they're going to have to bring their own generation to ensure the lights stay on for the rest of us.
And I agree too, and back to Representative Mullins' point too on load forecasting, right? I think we have 12 data centers and 12 data center proposals in Lackawanna County and growing, but each one of them is not going to be built, but they're all in those forecasts, which is then in turn.
That's right. And you guys passed that in November, and you already saw a load forecast out of PJM come out in January or February.
Yes. And I think it's, it's our responsibility, I think, to make sure that the data centers are bringing that generation and paying for those investments, and that's not going on the average ratepayer. But thank you for your answers. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Reichert.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us here today. Just to follow up a little bit on Representative Marcel and some of her comments, another way in which our neighbors to the south, in response to some of the decisions they've made to cut back generation on their end, as impacting Pennsylvania, is through the the development of new transmission lines, 2 of which go through the southern part of Pennsylvania, one in York and one through my district and Representative Kaufman's district, and I think a little bit in Rich Irvin's district too in Franklin County, where essentially TransSource PJM are proposing to take acres of pristine farmland, some of the best non-irrigated soils in the United States, so that we can put in a transmission line so that folks down in Maryland, Northern Virginia can have access to cheaper power. And this has been ongoing for about 10 years. Where do we stand, and what's the PUC's role in that?
So as you know, we did have a court case going on in that. We did appeal to the Third Circuit. We lost there, and we decided not to appeal to the Supreme Court. We are preparing to potentially go to FERC and file a complaint on that. We're in the process of developing that complaint now.
Very good. Because I think my understanding is that they're looking to resubmit. Does that sort of kick them back to square one, or?
So if you recall that line, there was 2 segments to that line. The eastern segment through York County is no longer needed because in the interim, other projects were built, so it removed that need. The western leg is still needed. That's through Franklin County, and I believe they're probably going to go forward and try to rebuild.
When we say need, we're talking about an efficiency need or a reliability need. What's the need that they're proposing?
We'll see what they file. I don't know what they're going to file. I'm assuming they're filing it under the same market efficiency project, but I don't know that.
Which is essentially getting cheaper electricity to Maryland and North.
Right, and yeah. Well, you said residents. I mean, it's data centers actually. It's not even residents. It's
data centers. Yeah. So really, with that line, is there any real benefit to the ratepayers in Pennsylvania by PJM putting these lines in?
Well, no, we would argue there's a harm to Pennsylvania ratepayers because our prices are going to be affected by generation leaving the state.
Good. That's
Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
like, I don't want to get too far into that because they will file with us, so we can't be seen as prejudging it. But it's really going to depend on, like you said, how they file it. Is it going to be reliability? Is it going to be efficiency? And also, when PJM looks at the dollars and cents, we'll see. We shall see, because things have changed over the years, right?
Sure. Yeah, we're 10 years down the road. But yeah, thank you for that. And just sort of following up, are there other ways? Are there other things that maybe PJM or TransSource should be looking at, such as the Transmission Siting and Economic Development Program? I know there's some federal funds available for that, for things like digesters. Again, this is going through some pretty pristine farmland, but there's other ways that we can incorporate ag into this generation. Are there other things that PJM should rather be looking at rather than perhaps these transmission lines? I think we've already done a letter saying yes. I mean, the last transmission line being proposed, 300-mile transmission line, the 765 kV coming out of West Virginia, going through southwestern Pennsylvania into the mid-state. We've already wrote a letter saying, what's the cost of dropping generation there? Have you studied Homer City? Because Homer City's coming online, taking generation out of there. Instead of building a 300-mile, $3 billion line, drop a generator for $1.5 billion. Right, and makes sense, right, to us.
You would think.
Thank you. I appreciate the background and again, everything that the PUC has been doing to support the folks back in Franklin County historically, and obviously looking forward to working with you as they continue to refile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Abney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, commissioners, for being here. I think that a common theme that we're hearing throughout today's hearing on both sides of the aisle is that a lot of us are getting many calls into our district offices from constituents who are concerned about the rising costs of their utilities. And they're always asking us, like, what are we as a legislator doing to try to help bring those costs down? For those who may be familiar with the PUC, they may be asking, what is the PUC doing? But I would say that from a lot of the calls that we are receiving, most folks aren't familiar with the PJM or who it is or what they do or how it operates and works. So I want to talk, but we talked about earlier today, they have a major impact on the cost of the cost of utilities across the Commonwealth. And so I have a question around their price cap request recently. On February 27th, PJM submitted a request to FERC pursuant to the Federal Power Act to extend the existing price cap and price floor for all reliability pricing model auctions through 2028, 2029, and 2029-2030 delivery years. Could you discuss the potential impact that this request may have on our Pennsylvania ratepayers?
Sure. So the price cap has been in place for 2 auctions now. It's estimated, the governor estimates that it's saved about $18 billion. To be honest with you, it's probably a little lowball. I think there may be a few more bucks in there. So after the auctions, PJM comes out and they say where the price would have been had the price cap not been in place. So, that number is quantified. It hasn't been extended yet. The filing's before FERC right now. So FERC has to decide whether they're going to allow the price cap to remain in effect. The current filing in front of FERC is to extend it for another 2 auctions. This is something that came out of the governor's collaborative on large load, as well as the White House. There was a question of whether we ask for a delay of the auction or extension of the price cap. As an OPSI vice president, I was supportive of extension of the call or extension of the price cap because, again, this market's broken. We have to fix it and replace it with a market that can meet the challenges that's being faced with today. So it didn't make sense to go as is. We either had to cap it or delay it. I didn't think it was a good move to delay an auction on supply when we're short on supply. If we're trying to get supply, why would we delay an auction for supply? So of the two choices, I thought extension of the price cap made sense because it protected ratepayers in a market that's not responding.
Gotcha. So just for clarification, for all the ratepayers and constituents across the Commonwealth who are watching this right now live, could you do you know when PJM is the timeline in which we can expect them to make a decision?
So it's not PJM's decision, it's FERC's decision.
I'm sorry, FERC,
And
yes.
it'll probably be in the next 60 days or so.
Okay.
So the next auction is scheduled to take place in June. It will definitely, that decision will happen before the June auction. I suspect it will likely be renewed for the next two auctions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Krupa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here today. I do want to say a special hello to Chairman DeFrank, Uniontown boy. If you were still there, I would be your representative. Always good to see you. I like small town boy does good stories. So there's been a lot of conversation this morning, and frankly, answers that I'm very glad to hear. But I want to follow up on the transmission line issues. Project 237, which was approved by PJM, is a roughly 22-mile transmission line being proposed by NextEra Energy and Exelon Corporation. It's going to go through multiple Pennsylvania counties. As is most appropriate to me and my constituents, or most relevant, is the Mid-Atlantic Resiliency Link. And my understanding is NextEra Energy just on March 3rd filed their application. These projects raise concerns following the Commonwealth Court's decision, and I believe the Third Circuit decision in TransSource Energy versus the PUC, which addressed the limits of transmission lines or transmission developers seeking public utility status and eminent domain authority in Pennsylvania. So, and the conversation's been all around this morning, but I'm going to echo it. Energy costs in Pennsylvania are already one of the biggest complaints that I'm hearing from my residents and small businesses and large businesses. At the same time, we are hearing warnings that as potentially as early as next year that we could be experiencing brownouts and blackouts across the Commonwealth, which just amazes me that that could be an issue in 2027. So from this perspective, it feels deeply offensive on several fronts. It's offensive that Pennsylvania landowners could be placed at risk of losing property rights through easements or eminent domains to build these transmission corridors when they don't benefit Pennsylvania residents. It's offensive that Pennsylvania communities may have to host massive infrastructure that could export electricity out of state, placing, not potentially, but it will place additional strain on our electrical grid at a time when reliability concerns are huge. And to add insult to injury, my understanding is that our constituents are going to see a hike in their electricity rates because they're going to bear a portion of the costs of placing this transmission line in. So my question is simple, at least the first one is, what specifically is the PUC doing to protect Pennsylvania landowners to ensure that projects like these truly serve the public interest of Pennsylvania residents before any approvals are granted?
So the project you're talking about is a federal project. We will get siting, a siting application, but just like TransSource, it comes to us, but there's not a whole lot of leeway in terms of particularly with this, because this is a core project. So basically, it's siting for us, but the project's being built somewhere in this area. That was a FERC decision, and that's where it's falling under. So we cite it, but FERC makes the decision to grant it. If it's a market efficiency project similar to TransSource, and this isn't one of those projects. Again, this is a core project. We are going to actively fight those at FERC and try to get basically challenging the PJM tariff on those projects. But, you know, there aren't a whole lot of levers in our, or a lot of quivers or arrows in our quiver in terms of this because it is a federal.
So with respect to due process issues to the individual landowners, if our individual landowners that are going to be affected, given notice and an opportunity to object at the PJM level, Because that's my fear.
Yeah.
If you are stuck then, if the PUC is stuck with choices that PJM has made, and those individual landowners are not afforded those basic due process rights, then we're in violation of both the United States and the Pennsylvania Constitution.
You're talking about the line that you recently had a public input or public meeting
Yes.
down in Smithfield,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I think this is one of those NHTSA lines that came out of federal legislation. So I'm not sure in terms of that. Like, I don't even know the PJM even had a point in this. We're happy to get back to you and get more information on that, but I believe that was one of the NHTSA approvals for reliability, and that's why I say it's a core project.
Will the commission require a Pennsylvania-specific cost analysis before approving the project or denying the project? Or keep it neutral?
Well, sure, we're going to look at a cost-effective analysis, but again, when we looked at our cost analysis in TransSource, the court didn't agree with us.
I have many more questions, but my light is red. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great seeing you, Representative.
You too.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Malagari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate Commissioner being here, and really do appreciate all of you for your work. I have a couple questions, two different topics. The first question I have is, to give you some context, over the past 2 years, a community in my district, a 55-plus community, has been dealing with power outages occurring in their community due to storms and due to winter weather, and also high wind events as well in the summer. Mr. Chairman, we're seeing an uptick in these service outages and concerns over grid stability. We see that. And as we transition our energy portfolio, we're seeing that more. What specific measurable benchmarks is the Commission setting for utility companies to improve that last mile reliability? And what clawback mechanisms are you prepared to implement if these companies receive rate increases but fail to meet the reliability standards?
So we are seeing reliability suffer around the Commonwealth. A lot of it is storm related. We are seeing the impacts of storms, the frequency of them are more so, and the intensity is more so. The storms we had out in western Pennsylvania last year produced sustained 100-mile-an-hour winds. You are not going to build infrastructure to withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds. If you do, you are not going to be able to afford that infrastructure. So it's a question of reliability with affordability. Those are not competing interests. Those are complementary interests. It has to be affordable to be reliable. So it's that balance. It's how to harden the system to withstand some of the challenges that it's facing, weather challenges that they did not face 40 years ago.
And this same community sent me a message in one of these storm events. 22 hours they went without electricity. A really good question to this, and this has to do with that last mile of transmission, is what are we doing with regard to keeping our utility companies held to account and making sure that those pendulous tree limbs that are hanging down and potentially causing these outages to occur, what are we doing to hold them accountable to make sure that that happens?
So again, we don't have enough boots in the ground to walk every wire in Pennsylvania. So when we hear things like that, please report it. We stay on utilities all the time about tree maintenance because it's so easy to do. That's easy maintenance to do. It's cheaper maintenance to do. That makes sense. So we do get on them. And please, your constituents see these trees. Please let us know.
I appreciate that.
We don't know if you don't tell us.
And my second question, different line. Recently, members of our committee were out at the Limerick Nuclear Generating Station from Constellation. While we were on site, we walked the site outside and went to where they keep the spent fuel rods, the dry casks, as they call them. After we remove spent fuel rod, it's only about 10% of the fuel usage that has been utilized, so about 90% remains. Other countries and other areas of the world utilizing small modular reactors or reutilizing those fuel rods to allow them to get to 70%. There may be a safety aspect to this that we're seeing within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and in our generating companies. However, has there been an assessment done with us to be able to utilize these rods a little bit further to get more energy out of them so that way we're not continuously piling up 90% left fuel rods on our generating stations.
So, and I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Barrow, who's just recently joined a group for nuclear waste at the neighborhood level. I don't even know if you had the first meeting yet, so I'm kind of putting her on the spot. But you are absolutely correct, Representative. We can learn a ton from France. France has an incredible nuclear program. This next generation of nuclear in Pennsylvania, with small modular, I hope we've learned from the past. Everything's uniform, everything's standardized in France, so you're able to take a part from one generator in one part of the country, put it into another generator in another part of the country, don't skip a beat. You're able to move personnel from one facility to another, and they know how it works because it's all the same systems. They recycle all of their fuel, so they're doing all those things. I hope when we get into, or if we get into small modular nuclear, that we learn from that and we do uniform, we decide on what system we want and put that everywhere, because that is cost effective.
I appreciate that. And as my colleague from Beaver County pointed out, we need as much baseload generation as we can get. This is one way to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Barton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Chairman DeFrank. I certainly, since we're giving shout-outs, Commissioner Zerfus from Tamaqua, Pennsylvania, welcome. Glad you're here as well. And
we're better in the southwestern part of the state, right, Representative?
Hold on.
That's a better coal area out there.
I think the NEPA representation here has something to say.
so we have, but we have hard coal. Right?
That's right.
The commissioner was just telling me about a proud painting she has in her office depicting hard coal, and I proudly represent Schuylkill County. And I think there's significant concerns, Chairman, about the impact the governor's press proposal would have if enacted as part of the governor's lightning plan. Some of my concerns include the impact to grid reliability by risking the loss of investment in reliable thermal generating, which threatens Pennsylvania's status as a net exporter of electricity and negatively impacts the APS Tier 2 generation resources, including waste coal generation facilities. Can you speak about these different concerns and the potential impacts this proposal would have on these Tier 2 generation resources?
So, in terms of the proposal on Tier 2, I think that, the General Assembly has made some changes in Tier 2, and I think we've seen some of those costs go up. In terms of the press proposal, what I think it does is it gives us resource diversity. One of the issues we're challenged with, and in addition to the increases in the capacity market at PJM, the actual increases has been in the cost of fuel. And as we are seeing, as gas prices go up, electric prices go up. Gas prices go down, electric prices go down. We're tying these more and more together. A press proposal or whatever you want to call it, any sort of, portfolio standard legislation is going to give you fuel diversity, so we're not putting all those eggs into one basket and allowing the market to drive that, because that's what's happening now. Gas by far is the lowest cost, new generation to build. You can't build a nuclear power is lower cost, but for new generation, natural gas, and that's why it's the reference resource at PJM, is because that's what's being built. It's the most economical.
So keep in mind what tier 2 status was installed to assist the waste coal industry at a time when they couldn't compete with natural gas, to your point. And without those programs, many waste coal plants wouldn't be operating today at all. So the benefit of running these plants is continued reclamation, and conservation of pre-act mine pits that would otherwise not be reclaimed in Pennsylvania. The cost and time needed to replace any of the waste coal generation will both be significant in a deregulated electric market. And investors will be hesitant to put up the amount of investment required without knowing what returns might be at the end. They'll need certain returns on their investments, right? That's fair to say. So I don't think we can turn a blind eye to the waste coal plants at all. And keep in mind, you talked about costs going up. The spot prices in last year's AEPS were $36. Currently, prices are roughly about $22, and they've been under $25 for most of the past year. A falling price doesn't sound like the market is anticipating any type of credit shortage. So, likewise, this would lead to lower program costs too.
So I will say, first off, on APS, we are headed for force majeure on that. We met with ARIPA last week. We went through it. Unless they're building a new generator, they will not have enough credits to meet the need, likely next year. So we will have to declare force majeure, suspend Tier 2 APS credits until credits accumulate back up, and then reinstitute the program. I understand the problem or the issues that waste coal generators have had, and those are tight margins. It's, bringing that coal there, cleaning up the environment, as you said, as well as producing electricity. However, those costs have increased significantly from $3.6 million in 2021 to $376 million in 2024. They increased by 12,500% over 3 years. We have to put more credits into Tier 2 to stabilize that pricing.
But keep in mind where we are right now at $22 versus $36 of last year. So that's significant, and under 25 for most of this past year. So in my yellow light's on, but in 2024 compliance year, there were almost as many eligible Tier 2 credits created, 13.3 million, as retired, 13.4 million. So we can conclude that the market is coming into a balance as indicated by the lower credit prices, can't we?
But you realize that that's a smaller percentage of AEPS. So Tier 2 only represents 8%, Tier 1's 10%, and Tier 2 outcosts Tier 1. So Tier 2 is more expensive than Tier 1 for less power.
I have further comments, but it's a short day and my time is up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Webster.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. Chairman Frank, I'm glad you're here. I was, as we were watching back and forth, I think you're hearing loud and clear that I think we share a lot of different concerns. We obviously coming from different angles, and I'm going to ask you a different set of questions, but it occurred to me at first that I don't want your job. And then I thought, well, that's a good challenge, right? So if you like a good challenge, maybe,
I can stay in it a little longer then.
Maybe we could do this. I'm going to talk a little bit about the weather normalization adjustment. My understanding is the calculation originates a 30-year look back. Is that where it starts? Is that accurate?
I am not sure what the look back is. We can get that information for you,
because and we may go on to other questions, because the follow-up question to that was sort of to understand what data we have of whether the adjustments being made and the rates are at all consistent with current weather, right?
So
if
we can
we
get
go
that
back too far, and we talked
we
about.
can get that data for you as well. We can get you I believe we can give you what was paid out in WNAs and then what was given back. This year, customers are certainly benefiting. They've gotten more back from a WNA than they paid out. I'm not sure that's not the case every year. I suspect it's probably reversed in most years.
You saw where I was going. So the data and the analysis, and then and sometimes we manage risk and sometimes we shift risk around. So knowing which way the race
we'll get that information.
That would be very helpful. Well, good, because that gives me time for this completely different question, and that is a concern that's very dear in my district. Right, we're talking about data centers, and we've spent a lot of time on energy, not so much on water. But in my area already, because of extreme storms, because of infrastructure that we have in place that gets water into our creeks really rapidly, rather than filtering down into aquifers and wells, we're already at a position where we're closing areas that just don't absorb water the way they used to, and so we have to pipe it in. And as we look at the impact of data centers and water usage, just your assessment of maybe talking about managing those risks as well.
Sure. So water management is a DP function, water withdrawal. I will say that most data centers, it depends on the system. A lot of them operate closed-loop systems, so once the water's filled, it's not a consumption usage. It's initially consumption usage, but it's more for cooling. So if they don't have a closed-loop system, they're typically not consuming it, they're using the water. So they're taking it in, cooling it, and then putting it back out. All those intake discharge issues are DP issues. Now, when we look at the Amazon facility up in the mid-state, that is being served by Public Water. Pennsylvania American's the provider there. We did approve the line extension. And again, that's something that Amazon paid. We wanted to make sure PA American ratepayers weren't picking up the tab for that. It was exclusively paid for by Amazon. And that's the biggest challenge with this. When we talk about our large load tariff, it's insulating customers from these costs and how we best do that. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's more challenging. But we have to make sure we're insulating these customers.
I think, and I'm looking across, the chamber here this morning, I think we all agree with that. Number one is protecting our residential ratepayers and then letting the economy grow at the same time. But we have to
And we can do both.
Yep.
We can do both. It's not either or, it's both.
I think there's an agreement on that part. And then we're going to kick and scream about how we make that happen. You bet. Thanks for your inputs.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank the gentleman, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Chairman. I'd like to continue that conversation on the AEPS, and I just wanted to start out at the end of the previous questions. I think we might have swapped our Tier 1 and 2 percentages, right? It's 8% currently for Tier 1.
Tier 1, I just got the note handed to me, yes.
No problem at all. I just wanted to make sure. I started to scramble because I was like, wait, is it in my mind? Yes. So, but overall, AEPS, I'm an all of the above guy, but also, Pennsylvanians are suffering from rate increases. And AEPS, as it stands now, over $700 million additional cost that we both agree came and are paid for by Pennsylvania ratepayers. 48% of those costs were Tier 1, 52 were from Tier 2. So it's almost a 25% difference. I'm taking these facts from your PUC's APS report. Right. You're familiar with them, but I'm just, the viewers may not. So when we look at Tier 1, which is, primarily wind and solar, they're costing $29.50 a megawatt hour compared to Tier 2, which is $26.90 approximately a megawatt hour. So that's almost 10% more a credit. And Tier 1, right, we're getting, when we talk about waste coal in Tier 2 is 100% in-state facilities versus more than half of our Tier 1, our solar credits are purchased from out of state. So I realized before your department does not have the environmental aspect, but we have a lot of waste coal in Westmoreland County, over 1,000 acres of waste coal according to our conservation district. And so we have the environmental cleanup and the benefits that waste coal brings. My question is, isn't it accurate to say that Tier 2 delivers more electricity at lower cost per megawatt from in-state providers with the base load power that you had mentioned as compared to the not as reliable Tier 1 wind and solar?
I'm not sure of that. We'd have to get back to you because I'm not sure that I agree with you on your numbers. I wanted to check with our staff here. So I'm not sure. I will say that we did close borders for solar. We also closed borders for Tier 2. So I am not sure what else in Tier 1 would be coming from out of state, because I noticed you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think
your comment on in-state.
Yes, a little bit more.
So if I could get back to you on that once we look through our technical staff.
Absolutely. And then if we're drilling down a little bit more about the wind and solar, the reliability issue, because I think in July of 25, PJM ranked solar panels 11% reliability rating under their ELCC, the effective load carrying capacity. And you touched on that earlier about the reliability.
Yes.
You know, so when we look at the governor's press legislation, that HB 501, which has passed the House, you know, as a partisan vote, all Democrats supported it, all Republican opposed, that would increase those wind and solar credits from 8% to 35%, and then slice waste coal in half. Is it fair to say that ratepayers would end up paying significantly more if forced to absorb an 8% to 35% increase?
Yeah, so I think it's fair to say that ratepayers are going to pay more, you know, when you're increasing the percentages and you're prescribing what the increase is, as opposed to allowing the market to determine it. I will say, however, the farther out you look, that will likely stabilize, because as I'm saying, is we're putting all of our eggs into one basket and ignoring resource diversity. We're going to be tied to that resource then, regardless of what it is, whether it's waste coal, whether it's natural gas, whatever it is, we're going to be tied more to that resource.
I agree with you. Messing with it at all really puts a lot of things potentially
right.
out of
And the
balance.
question is where is the break-even point of the increased cost compared to the cost you're going to be saving in the long run?
Yes, and I think we also have to factor the environmental benefit that, you know, cleaning up waste coal, any plan that's knocking waste coal consumption, it really runs almost directly against environmental improvements, at least through my lens and the Sewickley Water Creek and, you know, the sheds and what we're trying to accomplish. Right. You know, the last thing I want to touch on, because these are solar credits, they're not necessarily always solar energy, right? Because a credit is just kind of a virtual thing that's purchased. So if people are purchasing credits, they may not be bringing more energy with them. Is that accurate?
A credit is
equal to
one megawatt.
1 megawatt equals 1 credit, so credit does equal energy.
But is it actually delivered energy? I mean, I know they can purchase a credit, but is that an actual delivered energy?
Into the system, yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Salisbury.
Thank you, Chairman. In the 34th District in Allegheny County that I have the privilege of representing, oh, we have still the red light on. I don't know if you want to reset, unless you just want to give me infinite time. It's up to you. Oh, okay, thanks. In the district in Allegheny County that I'm privileged to represent, last year we had an 11-day power outage that I think it goes without saying my constituents were not delighted about. So in the wake of that incident, I've put a lot of time going in the weeds, shall we say, of how public utilities work in Pennsylvania. I know in January you put out, you being the Public Utilities Commission, not literally you, put out a report evaluating the performance after that storm. And I know a lot of us were a little bit puzzled because the report was generally positive, but it did have some notes that I wanted to point out, which indicated that large-scale events continue to test electric distribution company assumptions about staffing, logistics, and restoration timelines, as well as the fact that sufficient access to skilled line workers, both internal and through mutual aid, is critical to restoring service safely and efficiently following major outages. The trouble that we're having is that we really don't see the investment in the personnel in Allegheny County. So my district entirely uses Duquesne Light, and I feel that the way that the capital investment system is incentivizing shifting routine maintenance over to a categorization of capital expenditure under the LTIP and DSIC programs exacerbates that problem. So what I would like to talk about and ask you about today is, do you feel that we're over-incentivizing calling things capital investments because of the fact that utilities companies like Duquesne Light can get that, I don't know if you'd like to call it a rebate, but effectively a payment back?
Right. Maybe.
Maybe.
That's and I'll be honest with you, that's when we go back to rate cases and timing of that and our ability to scrutinize what is capital expense and what isn't. That would certainly help with that because you're giving us more time to do that. As we're getting 30 rate cases a year, getting into that sort of detail makes it very, very, very difficult.
I know that it's very challenging when we do have a big storm because we have so many contractors working now. And I know, for example, when a lot of people were pulled in from even out of state to work on the outage last spring, a lot of them were unfamiliar with the local infrastructure. And to be very frank, a lot of them indicated that it was very poorly maintained.
Yes.
So is there any way to incentivize having more full-time staff when the state PUC system allows the usage of contractors in emergencies to be treated as a capital expense?
So one of the things that we have not done is we are getting into micromanaging that utility and telling them how many they need. I think it's more important to look at the reliability. When we look at their response of that storm, I think that it's clear that some best practices need to be followed by the company in question there. And, you know, I know their sister companies around the state was trying to help them that, using best practices, trying to get people in early, trying to put a company person with out-of-town crews. So then they have a resource there with the crew so they know where they're going. Little simple things like that that you wouldn't think we would have to talk about, but we are. So it's how to manage in that time of
The more that I dig into the way that the PUC regulates utilities, you know, we call them public utilities, but realistically they're not really public. A lot of people I talk to even think that sometimes their utilities are a nonprofit. But we do know that companies like Duquesne Light, Duquesne Light itself is almost entirely owned by foreign private equity. There is almost no American ownership of it whatsoever. There is no publicly traded portion of it. The more that I look at the system, the more I'm unable to comprehend any other conclusion than the fact that we are, through the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission's regulation of utilities, we are allowing foreign private equity to build wealth for themselves off the backs of taxpayers in Pennsylvania, off the backs of people who've lost their jobs in favor of contractors, and off the backs of ratepayers themselves who can ill afford it. Would you say that that's anything that you would contest, or is there anything that we can do about that?
So the issue of foreign ownership came up in the Senate in our hearing, and again, I think that's a policy decision of the body. If you don't want foreign ownership of public utilities, then you could pass a law that says we're not allowing foreign ownership of public utilities. For us to sit here and to say a foreign entity is not allowed to own that, I don't know that we're going to have standing. They're probably going to be in court the next day, and we'd likely lose. But a statute, I mean, having the weight of law is a different story.
Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady, Representative Devanzo.
Thank you, Chairman Harris. And Chairman DeFrank, always a pleasure to see you.
How are you? Good
Got to
seeing
give a
you
shout
again.
out to Southwestern Pennsylvania.
That's right. Mount Vernon.
That's right. That's right. I just wanted, Representative Nelson took a couple of my questions here, so I'm going to fill in a little bit. But in 2019, Governor Wolf signed an executive order, entered us into RGGI. From 2019 until now, how many baseload power plants have been built across the Commonwealth?
So I'm not sure. We're going to get back to it. So Representative Kell said that the one in York, I know it was built in that time period. I don't know when it was announced, though.
Okay. How many have closed?
How many have closed? We can get that number for
Okay.
you. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And whenever you answered Representative Nelson's question.
2019 was Lackawanna Power Station, natural gas.
Okay, so there was only one that closed? Or you just
Opened.
Oh, I'm sorry, one. Okay, I got you. Okay, so I believe in a previous speaker, you said that on a daily market makeup, 8% is renewables, wind and solar. Is that accurate?
Under the Tier 1 APS, yes.
Yeah, Tier 1. So if we took a day in February where it was brutally cold here for those few weeks, at 4 o'clock, everybody comes home from work, you know, the solar panels aren't going to cut it. If everybody was going to cook dinner, turn their lights on, if we needed to supply electricity for our grid, where would we get that electricity to make up for that renewable that just wouldn't be there that day?
So the way the grids, and the previous representative from Greensburg talked about this, ELCCs, effective load carrying capacity, and what it is it puts a percentage on types of generation and how they respond. So as he pointed out, solar panels are 10, 12%. So when PJM's looking at their grid and they're looking at, do we have enough power, they're taking that into consideration. So if they have 100 megawatts of solar, they're counting it as 10 megawatts, basically. So you need baseload generation. I'm not going to deny that. You need dispatchable baseload generation. Our grid is a real-time grid, and you have to be able to manage it real-time.
So whenever we have to go out and subsidize that grid, what do we pay for that electricity at that time? Whenever we got to go get that base load to get caught up, what do we pay for that base load?
So so again, we're an exporter, so if you're asking, I don't know that we import a lot. I mean, PJM imports, obviously, and it depends on the situation. You know, during the last cold spell, PJM was exporting a lot of power. We were sending power up to New York ISO. We were sending power up to New England. We were sending power out to MISO. So we were exporting a lot of power. There are times, though, during Winter Storm Elliott, for instance, we were importing power. It depends on the specific situation, and it depends on what's happening, because a lot of that's coming in at the spot price. So it could be $20, it could be $200. It depends on the market conditions at the time.
Yeah, so here's my concern with the green and the renewables. Up front, we are subsidizing it. We already have folks who can't afford their electric bills. Now we got to give them assistance. Now, whenever we got to bring in the base load capacity, you know, to make up for that market when the green energy isn't there, it just keeps pushing up on our ratepayers. And not only that, but what happens in 10 to 15 years when these solar panels need decommissioned, or windmill blades need somewhere to go? That's all going to get passed on back to the ratepayer. And my point is it's time here in Pennsylvania, we're the energy leader across this country. We need to do things so that we are producing baseload electricity here in the United States. So, thank you.
Chair thanks the gentleman and recognizes Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, it's great to see you today. It's great to have you here. We've heard a lot about the costs of affording utilities, electric mostly, but I want to hone in a little bit on sort of the process, right? If a utility company wants to raise its rates, whether it's kilowatt hour, whether it's the rates for water usage or gas usage, what does that process look like? They can't just wake up one morning and say, hey, we're going to raise our rates on our ratepayers. How do they go about doing that?
So again, we're in a restructured state. So let's take a gas company. The majority of people get their natural gas supply from their gas company. You know, a lot of people get electric supply through default service from their electric company. So if we're talking the cost of that, that's a default service proceeding in the terms of the electric company. It's a gas cost proceeding in the case of a natural gas company. So that's one side of it. If you're talking about the delivery of the commodity, whatever it is, that's their rate, that's their tariff, and that's a different side of the conversation.
But in order to do that, they have to make their case to the Public Utility Commission, correct?
They absolutely do. It has to be in the public interest. So in the case of a rate case, they file their rate case. As I said, they're statutory advocates. So the statutory advocates is the Commission's Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement, I&E, the Small Business Advocate, and the Consumer Advocate. Those are the three statutory advocates. And you may have other groups like PULP or others that get involved in a case. They enter the case, and then it's a litigation. And if they may come to a settlement, or they may fully litigate it. At some point, if they come to a settlement, the question is it a partial settlement? Is it a full settlement? Did all parties sign to it or not? Sometimes a specific aspect of a case might be fully litigated with everything else settled. It just all depends. It's very case specific, but that's sort of the general framework of it. Those parties develop a revenue requirement, and that's the money it takes to run that utility. That includes all their capital expenditures, but it also includes ROE and their rate of return, or return on equity. That's all included in that. And then the second part of the rate case is how we divvy that cost up.
Right.
How big's the pie, and then what pieces we're cutting of the pie per rate class.
And there's an obligation to be fair to homeowners and businesses and everything who's going to pay that rate. So in my district, we have had difficulty with our water provider, Veolia, and some discolored water for a long period of time over a widespread area. And so, and they just recently, January of last year, their rates were, they were approved to raise their rates. And then so in January of 2025, they're approved to raise their rates. And then, throughout the summer, we get a substandard level of service with discolored water and things like that. So what is a consumer left to do in that case? And how does the PUC step in if there is an issue with utility or delivery of a specific utility service? How can consumers interact with the PUC to make sure that that utility is holding up its end of the bargain to provide whatever service that they're?
So the best way of letting us know about it, whether it's through a complaint process, informal complaint process, formal complaint process, calling us, calling you, letting us know about it. If we get enough complaints in, I&E may look at, or our Bureau of Consumer Services, that's who the complaints come into. They may look at and say, hey, we have 100 complaints on this water quality, the service quality complaints here. We better send this to our I&E. And then I&E, they're a quasi-independent bureau. We cannot direct them to investigate and or prosecute. They do that on their own because we sit as a judge in those cases. So if it's a lot of cases like that, a lot of times our BCS will refer to I&E, and then I&E will take it from there.
Well, I will say I'd like to thank all the constituents who reached out. We have been engaged in that process, myself, Senator Kim's office. I want to give a shout out to JJ because he's been in person with us in the meetings in our office. So I just want to commend the PUC on its action relative to what's taking place with Veolia. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairman DeFrank. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. Representative Alsumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, glad to have you here this afternoon. Last November, your agency presented a program called the Large Load Model Tariff, designed to support grid reliability and manage the impact of large load customers, such as data centers on the electric grid. Can you provide an explanation of what exactly that is and update on where it stands?
Sure. So the update is we hope to have that considered a vote before the full commission sometime in March. Hopefully it's in March, maybe in April, but we're real close to a final order there. It's designed to make sure our existing customers are protected from potential stranded costs from data centers. As I talk a lot about this development, this is a great opportunity for us. We should be trying to encourage this development, but we have to do it in a responsible manner because it's such a large demand here. Typical development, as I always say, we're not talking about turning lanes and curb cuts here. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in utility infrastructure. So if that load doesn't come in, if that customer doesn't show up, ratepayers are on the hook for all that build out. And they're not getting the benefit of the increased load. So that's what we want to do is make sure that customer, our existing customers, are insulated and protected from any stranded costs. One of the things I hope our tariff does is allow for third-party build-out. And what that means is if a data center needs, a substation built and they need so much transmission lines, what happens if the data center actually builds the substation? This is about speed to market for them. They want to build it as quickly as possible. It's in their best interest to make sure it's, it has to comply with the energy system it's connecting to, or else it won't work. So everything's in their best interest to make sure it happens as quickly as possible. And the best part for the ratepayer is they're not even touching it. They're completely insulated from it. We would be one of the first states to do something like that. I think that's what's important, though, is protecting existing ratepayers from costs that may be happening from these.
So when exactly would that be taking effect then? You said your meeting's in March, April.
So we have meetings basically every 2 weeks. Our next meeting's next week. I do not believe it's not on the agenda for next week. It may be on the following meeting. I would hope that our target was the end of March. So I don't know if we're going to hit it or not. I hope if we don't hit it, we're very close to it, though. And again, keep in mind, that is only a suggestion. That is not the weight of law. I know that the General Assembly is considering a bill here. There's a bill over here. There's a bill in the Senate. If you do that, that will have the weight of law. We're only giving a suggestion here. An electric company can take it or leave it.
Okay, switching to another topic, and some of my fellow colleagues I heard brought this up before, but it's worth repeating, especially in my district. In Wayne and Pike counties, we continue to see power outages linked to dead and dying trees. Since I've taken office, and prior to that, I was a township supervisor, and in my local township, same thing. I frequently get questions from constituents as to why the problem seems to be getting worse. Can you tell me exactly what the PUC can do to work with utility companies to address the right-of-way issues, which are big, maintenance, and ultimately to ensure grid reliability for our taxpayers, keeping in mind every time the wind, in my district exceeds 25 miles an hour, there's guaranteed power outages.
So one of the things we do is we monitor that. If we know about it, we'll get on the utility and ask them to clear areas. So please, if you see areas, a road location, anything like that, that's helpful to us, and call us about that. If we get enough of these complaints, again, this goes to I&E. It's a quality of service issue. And then the commission will do a formal investigation of the utility. If they find that filing a complaint is warranted, they will. Again, we don't control that. That's controlled at the bureau level, and then that comes up to us to adjudicate.
Okay, I actually have a report with me. I was wondering if I might be able to hand that in afterwards.
Please.
Thank you.
Representative, any assistance you can give us with off right-of-way tree legislation? Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Chairman Struzzi.
Chairman Harris. Before I get into my questions and comments, Representative Metzger, who is the chair of the Consumer Protection, Technology, and Utilities Committee, was not able to attend today, but he does have a written question that he would like a response to related to the PUC's role in the electric choice marketplace. So I'll give this to you when we conclude here.
Thank you.
Yes. So a lot of discussion about baseload energy. Electricity prices are simply exorbitant right now, and you stated simply it's a supply and demand issue. And I know there's a lot of talk about data centers and the need for increased energy, the demand that will come from data centers, but I think they're sort of the scapegoat right now. We need to look back at what caused this problem, and that was bad policy, or the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and really unfair subsidies in the marketplace that put baseload energy out of business. I saw that firsthand with Homer City. We saw that in Cheswick and other power plants here in Pennsylvania, and the lack of new generation. So clearly, this has been a problem that's been building for years, and you yourself said, we told you so. And so here we are today. So how do we get out of this problem, right? That is to build more baseload energy, and natural gas is the most viable, quick solution. So within my area back home, not specifically in my district, but in and around it, we have the Keystone and Conemaugh generating stations. I'm sure you're familiar. They were set to be retired, but the owners have now reconsidered that. They're looking for the option to continue, which I think is something that should be supported. 3.4 gigawatt generation capacity into the grid. They are a reliable baseload source of power. And really, you know, with the PJM auctions predicting the shortfalls of baseload generation, everything we discussed here today, would you agree that securing a commitment to keep these plants open would be one of the most cost-effective and efficient ways to cover this baseload shortfall?
So I think we're going to see what happens with those plants. DOE has been putting out the executive orders there. We have one on Eddystone. It's a gas plant. It's not.
Specifically, yes or no, would that not be a cost-effective way?
I think we should put as many watts on the grid as we possibly can.
Okay.
So that means keeping them on, then absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes.
Yes.
Then. Okay. And then just a quick follow-up on that. If we can succeed in keeping these plants open, retaining their reliable and cost-effective generation capacity, what would that mean to electric bills for ratepayers across the state?
If we keep them open?
Yes.
Again, I think that, you know, we need them open and then some. I mean, this is a supply-demand issue, but to be clear, though, it's beyond supply-demand. We're seeing the cost of energy increase as well. So capacity markets increase. When you look at the last Market Monitor report, the actual larger increase is from the cost of power, though.
Right.
And that's why I say that, you know, gas is the lowest cost new power, dispatchable new power. There is nuclear is lower cost, but we don't see anyone building a nuclear plant, particularly in a restructured state, because there's a lot of risk there.
But essentially, though, if it's a supply and demand issue, keeping them online, adding those gigawatts, maintaining
Right, we
those
need more
gigawatts in the
supply.
grid, right, it would help lower the
Right,
cost of
and
electricity.
part of that is, right, not losing supply.
Okay, good. Just a quick clarification. Rep. Nelson was talking about the solar credits, and it was Kim mentioned that that's a credit is a megawatt, right? That's what you said?
Credit is a unit of energy, yeah.
Is that utilized in Pennsylvania, or can that megawatt credit be utilized in another state?
We closed the borders. I'm pretty sure ours, Pennsylvania's, are just you. Actually, let me not speak for other states, but I.
So solar, we did close the border for solar.
Okay.
There's other credits in Tier 1, so it depends on what credit it is. Remember, we closed the border for Tier 2 credits across the entire tier. We did not close the border for Tier 1. We only closed it for solar because we have the solar carve-out.
Could we get some additional clarification on that? Because we're getting different information on how these solar credits can be used, when they can be used. Is it current megawatts? Is it megawatts from the, you know, a few months ago?
We're happy to, you know, our TUS staff, happy to get.
And then just one budget-related question related specifically to your specific budget. Does your fiscal year 26-27 budget include enough funding to cover the requirements of the passage? I'll get specific. The following requirements of the passage of Act 45 of 2025. Specifically, do you have enough engineering and economic staff to perform these forensic audits related to load forecasting, or will you require additional funding or outside consultants to review the data and ensure Pennsylvania ratepayers are not paying to overbuild infrastructure based on speculative data center projections?
So we already had a consultant in place whenever you guys had passed that, because we were already looking at load forecasting.
Okay.
We will have to staff up. We're trying to reallocate positions. So we're actually looking at a cut in our offices, the 5 commissioner offices, and repurposing positions in each commissioner's office out into the agency.
So you may, in fact, need additional staff?
We may.
Okay.
We're not sure, though.
Okay, and then just a quick follow-up on that. Can you cover the cost to create the required permit tracking system for the PUC's applications and permits for the regulated utilities and the issuance of certificates of public convenience, as well as other utility determinations?
So I'll have to get back to you on those costs. We are starting to come into compliance with that permit tracking. I will say that a lot of that stuff does not apply to us because we're an adjudicatory agency. So it's not, we're not DEP issuing a permit. Right. Some of these are contested proceedings. And so they go before ALJs, they go before judges, and they're litigated. It's not necessarily an agency issuing a permit.
Okay.
Because the legislation puts certificates of public convenience in as a permit. So that's the contested proceedings that I don't know that we've ever given a certificate when it wasn't. I'm sure there are. But.
All right, well, thank you for that. I appreciate you being here today, your candor. I think we can all agree that affordable electricity will help build our economy, grow our businesses, help our families make ends meet. So we need to do everything we can to make sure we're increasing that base load energy, not implementing policy that threatens that, like the Lightning Plan, Pacer, and Press. I think across the board, the building trades and the energy producers see that as Reggie 2.0 and simply another shot at energy production. So I think we need to really work together moving forward to make sure we're doing the best for Pennsylvania related to energy production. So thank you again for being here. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank the gentleman, and thank the commissioners. With that, we want to thank the members of the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission for being here with us and for answering questions, and thank you to the members for a good week, good bipartisan week of budget hearings this week. We will be back here next week for our final week of budget hearings, and so we will be back here in the chamber Monday at 10 a.m., where we will be joined by the Department of Transportation. See everybody on Monday. This hearing is now adjourned.